The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The Syrian escalation is continuing. Ground troops, Russia is involved. Civilian deaths have started to trickle up. Syria's chief of staff today declared a wide-ranging ground offensive by government forces. Yesterday, Russian airstrikes accelerated, launching from the Caspian Sea, and these are backing Syria's multi-pronged advance into two different provinces. Lewis, at this point, we've heard from General Ali Ayub, who said that the Russian strikes have absolutely facilitated the Syrian expanding military operation to eliminate what they call terrorists, which is a term, this is the key thing, this is clearly not about ISIS exclusively. We had the suspicion that this was not only about ISIS when numerous reports indicated that the locations of Russian airstrikes seem to have nothing to do with ISIS whatsoever. And it is abundantly clear now, Lewis, for better or worse, the Russian military is supporting the Bashar al-Assad regime's pushback against opposition forces.
Yeah, and so what terrorist, I guess, is just a universal term for anyone who opposes the Assad regime. And I mean, what can the U.S. really do here? I mean, do we want stability in the region? Does that mean the Assad regime staying in power? Because what happens if he doesn't? Does ISIS take over? You know, what happens?
Well, this came up last Friday, President Obama doing a pretty wide-ranging press conference, and President Obama very clearly saying the idea that all of the moderate opposition groups are equally terroristic and just as bad as ISIS is absolutely wrong. Now, you can simultaneously, and this is where nuance is required, the reaction every time we talk about this, Lewis, is, wait a second, do you guys buy the American strategy of supporting so-called moderate rebel groups which inevitably turn out to actually be a really bad idea for the United States' own weapons being turned against the U.S., or do you support Vladimir Putin? This is such a false dichotomy, right? We have to talk here in shades of gray and nuance. We can simultaneously recognize that it's not guaranteed that if the Assad regime is toppled, the Syrian people will be better off. There is absolutely no guarantee of that whatsoever. At the same time, we can recognize that there is absolutely a sort of subterfuge taking place here with regard to Syria and Russia claiming it's just about fighting ISIS, when this is providing a terrific veil under which they can suppress all opposition.
Yeah, I would assume that with Russia backing the Assad regime, I think it's safe to assume that the Assad regime will stay in power. And I really don't know how I feel about that. I know what he's doing to his people. At the same time, even if a moderate rebel group were to assume power in Syria, it doesn't mean that 1 year down the road there's another coup, another revolution, another civil war. I mean, anything can really happen.
Of course. And I think if we look back at Egypt and look at the sort of revolution that took place, not sort of, if we look at the revolution that took place and the excitement and everything that went with it, and then look at our analyses of how things were actually looking for the average Egyptian a year later and 2 years later, we have to sort of separate these two issues of what's better for the people on the ground and what seems to make more sense politically from a sort of world perspective. The Syrian army chief acknowledging that Russia has been absolutely key in what they've been able to do. Ultimately, what will happen, we don't know. It really is putting President Obama versus Vladimir Putin on the radar, sort of starting off with that 60 Minutes interview before last week that we discussed, and continuing to escalate. And that's a narrative which very interesting in the U.S., but it may not really be the important narrative here.
No, I don't think this is going to end in any type of Cold War situation or anything like that. But, you know, it's really just more of the same from Russia. They are a serious geopolitical enemy.
Last week, we talked about the huge controversy, and the week before, I should mention, over Turing CEO Martin Shkreli, who announced initially that his company was increasing by 5,000% the price per pill of Daraprim, a drug used for fighting a number of different infections. After the huge controversy that erupted, Martin Shkreli came out and said, you know what? We're going to scale back that price increase. Our question was, Lewis, how much will they be scaling back the price increase? The answer we now have is not at all. Not at all. The drug, which increased from $13.50 per pill to $750 per pill overnight, essentially, has not come down in price whatsoever. This has not happened. A 30-day, 30-pill supply of Daraprim currently costs at one local pharmacy that Business Insider spoke to $27,006. That's about $900 per pill, which, as I understand, is the $750 per pill. That is the sort of base cost, plus additional fees at the local pharmacy level for the distribution of that pill. So I guess the silver lining, and obviously there is no silver lining here, the silver lining is it hasn't gone up even more, but the drug price has not come down as we were promised. Did people just forget, Lewis, and everybody's moving on now?
Well, I think once it's clear that nothing has changed, this will probably blow up all over again. You can't expect a scumbag like this guy to keep his word, and it just keeps highlighting the problems we have with our system. I mean, should the federal government be able to control, to some extent, the prices of drugs? I think that could open up an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and there's certainly more than two sides to that discussion. From a broad perspective, it's absolutely fair to make the argument that, yes, for-profit businesses make these drugs, but in certain industries, there are ground rules. If you want to participate in the health insurance business, there are ground rules, like, for example, the maximum that you can charge out of pocket, the pre-existing conditions provisions, etc. So conceptually speaking, the government could say, in this industry, here are the rules with regard to pricing. The broader issue, though, is that of the amortization of research and development costs by charging whatever prices pharmaceutical companies want, sort of contrasted with the reality that much of the commons goes into the foundation of research and development that ultimately leads to the development of these drugs. So it's a completely false notion that these companies should be able to charge whatever they want because they've developed all of these drugs in the complete absence of any shared resources.
Right. And like we've mentioned before, in many cases, because of the patent system and things like that, there are these slight modifications to these drugs, and it allows them to capitalize on that patent system and keep selling these drugs for insane amounts of money.
Ben Carson, 2016 Republican presidential candidate and former neurosurgeon, was on Fox News. He was on Fox and Friends. And they were talking about President Obama's reaction to the Umpqua Community College shooting in Roseburg, Oregon. And it was mentioned that President Obama would be going to Oregon and meeting with the families of some of the victims. And Ben Carson said if it was him as president, he would probably skip meeting with the victims of this tragedy and he would just wait for the next one. How sensitive, Lewis? Let's take a look at the video of Ben Carson explaining what it is he would get up to.
What do you think of that?
Imagine a politician politicizing something. When do we get to the point where we have people who actually want to solve our problems rather than just politicize everything? I think that's what the American people are so sick and tired of.
Yeah, but you hate to let a good crisis go to waste.
They certainly, the politicians,
Right.
I mean, they are feasting on it.
But Dr. Carson, would you go? If the people of the community say don't go, would you still go if you're president on Friday?
Probably not. I mean, I would probably have so many things on my agenda that I'd go to the next one.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd go to the next one, Ben Carson says. And Brian Kilmeade just saying, sure, because obviously there will be a next one. Everybody knows that.
Very strange thing to say. I don't really, I don't know if he was even thinking about it when he said it. But yeah, there will be a next one, some type of disaster anyway. Maybe he didn't mean a shooting. Maybe he meant the next highly politicized, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he meant. Lewis reaching very, very deeply. Lewis reaching further than Joseph Smith when he was reaching into that bag to figure out what the Mormon teachings were going to be. Lewis reaching way further than him.
Or was it a bag or a hat? It might have been a hat.
I don't even remember at this point. Ben Carson also explaining that he would be willing to, quote, listen to ideas about how to stop mass shootings, but gun control is not part of the solution. So I guess he would be willing to listen, but he wouldn't actually do anything. He said, anything that they've proposed doesn't stop anything. Okay, well, that is not totally clear on that one. Going on to say, guns don't kill people, and the Second Amendment is extremely important. Daniel Webster said that America would never suffer tyranny because people are armed. There's something sort of unbearably creepy about Ben Carson, and it's hard for me to put my finger on exactly what it is. It's partially that completely monotone, flat affect that's reminiscent of someone on tranquilizers, but there's more to it, I think.
Well, he probably does have a prescription pad, right? So maybe, maybe he's on Xanax because he doesn't like speaking on camera and he needs to mellow out a little bit.
Do you agree, though, that there's something very strange about the way he communicates?
Yeah, he kind of has a strange delivery, but I wanted to say something about his comments.
Yeah.
What's wrong with making it harder for people to commit these mass shootings?
Because, Lewis, you will be just hurting the law-abiding good guys with guns.
Well, if this is the country we've decided that we want to live in, if this is the way we've decided we want to live, I think that is insane. You know what? I do think that people should be able to own guns, Dave, but we need to make it as hard as possible for freaks like this kid to not be able to do this.
Well, when you've got a gun nut mom your entire life with an arsenal of weapons, and that's certainly not going to help prevent any mass shootings. I think we can say that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Let's take a break. Lewis is on Twitter, twitter.com/Lewis Motomedy. I'm told I have to spell not only Lewis, but Motomedy. It's LOUISMOTAMEDI. Before I was just spelling Lewis because people thought it was like LUIS or LEWIS. And then people said, David, it's hilarious when you spell Lewis and then you just say Motomedy as if everybody obviously knows how that is spelled. LOUISMOTAMEDI. I'm on Twitter at dpacman, and I guess I'll mention it's PAKMAN. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show is funded by viewers and listeners to our show through something we call membership. You can find out more at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day is Darren Richardson, and as a member, Darren gets the bonus show in audio and video format, our entire archive of shows dating all the way back to 2005, and so many other great member benefits that you can read about and sample at davidpakman.com/membership. And remember, if you ever shop on Amazon, go to davidpakman.com/Amazon so that all of the purchases you make send us a little kickback and support the work that we do. I recommended the book, The Martian, a couple months ago, and now I am recommending the movie based on the book. I saw it over the weekend, Lewis, the Martian movie starring Matt Damon. The book is very, very good. The movie is also very, very good. And when I told Lewis I was going to see the movie, he said, yeah, it's just an opportunity for people who read the book to say the book was better than the movie. I'm not going to say that, though. What I am going to say is the movie is far less detailed about what it is that is going on, about explanations for why things are happening the way they're happening. It added a lot of Hollywood drama. It's less science-y. But it's still worth watching. It was a well-done Hollywood production. I liked it. Of course, I would recommend to everybody, if you see the movie and you like the topic, you like the story, read the book, because I think the book is able, as books are compared to movies, to go into so much more detail, not only about what's taking place, but about the sort of mental state of the characters as well. I recommend both, Lewis, but today the new recommendation is for the movie The Martian.
All right. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'll probably love it, as I have not read the book, and I can't be disappointed. in that way. So, Dave, I'm going to see it as soon as I can.
What interests you about it? Is it the storyline? Is it that it's a Ridley Scott film? Is it that you're really into actress Kate Mara? Like, what is drawing you to the movie?
Well, it's the premise, and I like Matt Damon, and I do like Ridley Scott, although as of late, he's kind of been hit or miss. But I would say that, yeah, those three things.
What do you mean hit or miss? Like, what of Ridley Scott's work have you not liked recently?
I really didn't like Prometheus that much, but maybe something happened there where there were some creative differences with the producers and whatnot. You know, maybe maybe he didn't have complete creative control and it would have been a different movie. I don't know, but there's a sequel coming out now.
All of my recommendations you can check out at davidpakman.com/recommendations. There's books, there's films, there's documentaries, there's what else? I don't know, all sorts of stuff there. davidpakman.com/recommendations. Check it out. Hillary Clinton is 12 points ahead of Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary field of California, according to a recent poll. All right, not that big of a deal, right? 12 points ahead. Clearly, Hillary is in the lead. Well, the big news is that Hillary has lost 19 points from her lead over Bernie Sanders in California in the last 4 or 5 months. Bernie Sanders was polling in the single digits in May in California. He has gained 26 percentage points to 35%, and the difference between Hillary and Bernie has been reduced by 19 points. Enthusiasm in California, also an issue for Hillary. 37% of likely Democratic voters said they would react enthusiastically if Hillary Clinton won the nomination, down 9 points from May. Lewis, could California be in play within a few weeks?
Maybe. Is it time that we start reconsidering our overall outlook on the Bernie Sanders campaign and his chances?
I think, you know, it's exciting and it's interesting to follow New Hampshire and Iowa polling. And it's interesting to see that nationally, Hillary Clinton in some polls has really lost a lot of her lead. The reality is, and this isn't about saying we don't like Bernie. This isn't about saying Bernie has no shot. The reality is Hillary Clinton is still very well positioned, particularly when we see that Joe Biden, who is not even running, is getting anywhere between 14-ish to 20-ish% support. And realistically, 2/3 of the Biden support, if he were to not run, would go to Hillary Clinton. There's no denying Hillary Clinton is in a very strong position right now. But the gains that Bernie Sanders has seen over the last 2 to 3 months are absolutely nothing to sneeze at. And with the debate next week, who knows what will happen?
The debate is going to be huge, I think. And Bernie's got momentum. You know, that's not just going to stop and disappear. So I like the direction we're headed here.
And regardless of what ultimately happens between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, it's interesting to also observe and important to observe the role that media coverage or lack thereof has played here. As of the end of September, Bernie Sanders had about 10% of the national corporate media coverage that Hillary Clinton had received. Hillary Clinton was receiving a crazy amount of coverage and continues to compared to Bernie Sanders. Forget about the coverage that Donald Trump has been receiving. So in a sense, it's amazing that the gains that Bernie Sanders has experienced have happened in spite of totally lopsided media coverage for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I don't know, promising maybe. Maybe people are realizing that the best place to get their information is not, what we've been doing for the past X number of decades. As
far as right-wing media, there's no question that right-wing media would prefer Hillary Clinton be the Democratic nominee over Bernie Sanders. Number one, it would be way better for their ratings to be able to push the conspiracy theories, the so-called scandals that surround Hillary Clinton. Fox News wants to be able to talk about Benghazi and the email scandal, the both of those narratives around Hillary Clinton. If Hillary is not the nominee, those obvious narratives disappear and they've got to go to what? Bernie's a communist, right? So it's abundantly clear that right-wing media is far more interested in Hillary Clinton being the nominee than Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, much easier for them to try and take down Hillary. But you're right. I mean, who's better for big business, Dave? It's going to be Hillary.
No question about that. And then lastly, I think when it comes to the insiders that are involved, the standard corporate media is going to do far better when the party insiders that they like to bring on for debates are more in line with the nominee. And as we know, many of Bernie Sanders' ideas, while completely uncontroversial when polled fairly, when the American people are fairly polled about those issues, are not yet the sort of mainstream ideas of the Democratic Party nationally. Some of them are, a $15 an hour minimum wage, for example, but not all of them are. So I think it's very clear that corporate media, particularly right-wing media, prefers Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. Let's talk about those good guy with a gun scenarios. Yesterday, I broke down a ton of the data we have around so-called good guys with guns. And today I have a story not about a good guy with a gun, but about a good woman with a gun. But actually, you'll have to decide whether it was a good woman with a gun or a bad woman with a gun. I'm talking about a 47-year-old woman with a gun who started firing the weapon at a suspected shoplifter outside of a Home Depot in Auburn Hills, Michigan. Police say that the woman saw a man leaving the Home Depot while being followed by the loss prevention employees at Home Depot. The man got into a small SUV driven by another man. The woman pulled out her legally concealed 9mm handgun and started firing shots off at the car. Multiple times, police believe one of the bullets did strike and flatten one of the SUV's tires. The suspects are described as two males in their 40s, one white, one black. They escaped in spite of the flat tire. The woman is cooperating with police. Police are trying to figure out whether they are going to charge her for shooting up a Home Depot parking lot. Police do say the Home Depot parking lot was filled with people at the time she opened fire, and a police spokeswoman told WXYZ that, quote, "the best thing that anybody who witnesses or thinks they witnessed a crime could do for us is to gather information, write down information, and provide it to officers when they arrive." In other words, not to start shooting your gun haphazardly in the direction of the suspected getaway vehicle. There could have been, as Tanisha Moner said, who's a firearms instructor, there could have been a 4-year-old child coming out of the Home Depot with their grandparent, or coming out of a car recently arrived in the parking lot with their parent. You can't shoot moving cars. You can't shoot at people who are retreating. You can't do that. Is there any offense, Lewis, that isn't a potential death sentence around the open carry crowd this day? Shoplifting at a retail store warrants shots being fired in a public parking lot.
And who knows who was in that car? You know, I mean, there could have been a kid in the back seat. Any number of things could have happened. I think that this woman is an idiot. I think there needs to be charges here. And, I don't know. I guess I'm glad no one got hit, right?
She absolutely should be charged. When we look at the law, right, no state in the nation issues concealed weapons permits with the authorization to shoot at people when there is no risk of loss of life or serious injury. If indeed these individuals were shoplifting and getting into the SUV and leaving, how can you possibly argue anybody was at risk of loss of life or serious injury? Maybe if you believe the driving was going to be erratic during their getaway, they might have, I don't know, run someone over. I mean, it's such a total stretch.
Yeah, and here we had someone who presumably was a law-abiding citizen, exercising their Second Amendment rights. Dave, I would feel much safer if I had to choose between everyone being able to have guns, me being able to have guns, including this woman, and nobody being able to have guns. I think I'd feel safer with nobody, because then there would be no one around like this doing stupid crap like this.
But Lewis, then the criminals would still get guns because they don't care if you're not allowed to have guns. And then nobody would have any weapons to defend themselves from the criminals.
Well, I think that, Dave, it's going to take some time. You need time to get those guns off the streets. You need time to get guns out of the country, but you have to start somewhere.
If only there had been an actual law-abiding citizen at the Home Depot parking lot, they maybe could have shot this woman before she started haphazardly firing her gun in the direction of the vehicle.
I have to admit that, if I was carrying a weapon and I saw someone
Here we go.
for no reason, when, it seems like when there's nothing happening, just take out a gun and start shooting up a parking lot, my first instinct would probably be to pull my gun and take them down before they kill someone.
Right. Had you a concealed carry permit and had you a weapon on you, if you saw this woman firing rounds at a vehicle, you might have shot her in self-defense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think my first instinct would be that, considering she probably did not announce herself as a police officer or anything like that, that this is some lunatic who's just shooting up a Home Depot parking lot. So what would I have done?
Well, it appears that indeed she was some lunatic shooting up a Home Depot parking lot. We will see if ultimately she is charged. After the break, we will talk about electronic voting machines, what's happening with them for 2016.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Lawrence Norden, who is Deputy Director of the Democracy Program at NYU Law School's Brennan Center for Justice. There's a new study from the Brennan Center for Justice on American voting machines. And yet again, Lawrence, warnings as to why we need to be really concerned about the current electronic voting machines that are out there. For people who may not know, let's start at the most basic. How many different types of electronic voting machines are being used across the country right now?
Well, the answer is probably dozens. They fall into two main categories, though. One are what are called direct recording electronic machines, and these are touchscreen machines some people may be familiar with. Most of them date back to technology from the 1990s, so they're not the kind of like iPads that we might be familiar with today. They're similar to kind of an ATM machine. And those are where you vote directly on the screen in terms of choosing candidates. Slightly more common are what are known as optical scan machines. These are machines that read ballots that voters fill out. So you fill out a ballot, you fill in the bubbles the way you would any kind of like Scantron standardized test or other kinds of paper documents that people fill out. And then the machine reads that ballot. It's scanned. It may have some messages on it for the voter to tell them how they voted. But that's also a kind of computer that reads the votes.
And what are the concerns with each of the two types similar, or are they different concerns?
There are certainly different concerns in that the technology is a little bit different. So when optical scan machines fail, you still have a paper ballot. And if there are good procedures in place, even if the machine isn't working, people can still vote. That might create some slightly longer lines, but you're not going to be turning people away while you're trying to fix the machines. For DREs, direct recording electronic machines, if the machine isn't working, you're going to need to come up with an alternative way for people to vote. Hopefully there'll be some paper ballots available at the polling place for people to vote on while those machines are being fixed. But, both of these sets of machines, for the most part around the country, were purchased soon after the 2000 election. A lot of people remember that was kind of a disaster of an election at the presidential level.
Yeah.
The country decided that we needed to replace punch card machines, which were used at the time, and lever machines to a lesser extent. And both sets of machines are essentially computers. They were mostly taken from designs in the late 90s. They use laptop technology, and in both cases, most of the machines that are in the U.S. today are over 10 or even 15 years old. And if you think about, if you bought a laptop in 2003 or 2004, you probably wouldn't expect it to be working particularly well today. And there's obviously been maintenance done on these machines, but they're across the board. Whatever machine is being used, for the most part, they're getting dangerously close to the end of their lifespans if they haven't already kind of passed what their projected lifespans are.
Every presidential election, every major election cycle, you hear and read about all of the thousands and thousands of reports of problems with different types of voting machines. And, you know, in my mind, I would love to imagine that, oh, after the election's done, all of these reports are looked at very closely and every machine involved is analyzed and repaired, and we're really well prepared for next time. And this time everything's going to go smoothly. Is that a total fantasy? Like, what actually happens in the period between elections with these machines?
It depends. So, you know, what you're describing, I can say that there are, one thing to remember about American elections is they're incredibly decentralized. So you really, for the most part, they're being run at the county and sometimes even at the town level. So there are counties that we spoke to in putting together this report where they actually are very on top of things, and particularly where the machines are older, they're looking at the kinds of problems that they have after each election, trying to diagnose them and figure out what needs to be done to maintain and repair them. But I would say probably for the most part that's not true, and certainly there needs to be more sharing of information. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that that we've seen with the DRE machines that has happened in some places is, and this might sound kind of hard to believe, but the glue between, and this just happens with age, the glue between the screen and the machine has started to degrade. And that can create all kinds of problems. People, in particular, a big problem that happens is that there's what's called vote flipping. People intend to vote for, let's say, Barack Obama, and Mitt Romney shows up on the screen.
Which specifically famously happened. There's that video from Pennsylvania, I believe it was, where that took place.
It's happened in many places, and it's going to happen more often as these machines age. It may start happening first in one county in Pennsylvania, but a county in Alabama or Arizona may be using those machines too, and maybe they got them a year or two later. They need to be made aware that these kinds of things are going to start happening more often, even if they haven't happened yet in those places. So that kind of information sharing, I would say, unfortunately, doesn't happen nearly as much as it should.
So 2016 is coming up. You mentioned generally that every election, the machines are older. So obviously that with every successive election cycle, that can become more of an acute problem. Is there anything specific other than just the general aging of the machines that you're looking at now for 2016?
Well, I think the big thing that it's too late, frankly, for most places to replace their equipment. So
okay, that was going to be the next question, which is whether it's even an academic issue at this point or a realistic one.
It is. I mean, look, some places are planning to replace their machines for 2016, but those plans were well underway. It's not a good idea in general to kind of rush into purchasing new equipment and try to implement it before the biggest election that occurs every 4 years. So a few places, Maryland is going to be replacing machines for 2016. Some other smaller jurisdictions, the state of Michigan may be replacing some of them in many places. But for the most part, we're not going to see new machines. So then the question is, what can be done to minimize problems? In 2012, according to a study from MIT and Harvard, between 500 and 700,000 votes were lost because of long lines. Some of that is related to machines failing on election day. So my biggest concern is making sure that jurisdictions are aware of the kinds of problems that can occur as these machines age, and they have plans in place for dealing with them to minimize the problems, because they're going to happen. And as you said, the machines are now 4 years older than they were in 2012. So we're going to see more of this.
Last thing I want to touch on, if you search on YouTube, for example, you'll find all sorts of videos purporting to be very grounded explanations or demonstrations of how easy it is to hack electronic voting machines. Talk a little bit about that. Is that really a fear, the idea that a county employee, for example, could just go in and delete the real number of votes for a particular candidate and put in whatever number they want? How realistic is that, and how likely is it someone, if they tried to do it, could actually get away with it?
Well, in some sense, there's truth in that. All of these systems run on software. You can manipulate software if you have access to machines. I think the good news is that most voting systems in the United States today have a paper record of how the voter voted. They can be used to check whatever results the software is telling you are the results. And a lot of places now do conduct those audits. I do think that there are, and I'm not alone in thinking this. I think most people think this. With the older machines, there are greater security risks. So we saw in Virginia, there was a state investigation done into a certain kind of machine that was used. It was an older machine. It had wireless capabilities on the machine. It was used in about 24% of the precincts in the state. They found that somebody could, using an iPhone, could hack into machines, change vote totals. They decertified those machines. There are machines that are running on Windows 2000, Windows XP, which aren't serviced anymore. There are no security patches for those systems. Those probably have more security vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean that those systems are going to be manipulated. Again, there are lots of checks that we can do to make sure that the machines are giving us accurate tallies, particularly when there's a paper record of the vote. The older these machines get, the more likely you're going to have problems. And anything that can be done, anything that's a security risk in terms of malicious behavior is also a risk for just failures. So I would say the big thing is, number one, make sure that we have all the proper procedures in place to be checking that these totals are accurate, for whether it's for an accidental failure or some kind of malicious behavior. And secondly, eventually, we just need to replace these systems.
Well, we're going to continue covering it. You know that the Brennan Center for Justice will also continue covering it. We've been speaking with Lawrence Norden, who's the Deputy Director of the Democracy Program at NYU Law School's Brennan Center for Justice. Thanks so much for talking to us about this.
Thank you for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
General Motors has now announced that they're going to roll out a fleet of autonomous self-driving vehicles for their 2017 model year at its technical center in Warren, Michigan, late in 2016. GM employees are going to actually have a mobile phone application where they can call the vehicles, which will be Chevy Volts, autonomous Chevy Volts, select their destination. It's sort of like Uber, but without a driver. And most likely these Chevy Volts will still have a steering wheel. They will still have pedals in case a human needs to take over control. GM describes the initiative as a, quote, rapid development laboratory. Now, as you may know from watching our show, Google and Audi have self-driving vehicles under experimentation that have already driven millions of miles, and many of those miles on public roads. And GM is actually going to be launching, it's not an autonomous vehicle, but it is a highly autonomous car, the 2017 Cadillac CT6, which will be available next year. It's going to have something called Super Cruise technology. So it won't really be an autonomous vehicle, but it will have a lot of the systems that are already available on cars and some new ones. So for example, adaptive cruise control. This is where you set not only your speed on the highway with cruise control, you set a distance to maintain from the car in front of you. If the car in front of you slows down, your vehicle will automatically slow down. I've actually driven a couple of cars that have that. It works very well. Of course, if there is an emergency stop of the vehicle in front of you, some of the adaptive cruise control systems don't yet have technology to deal with that. That's the next technology, which the GM Super Cruise vehicle will have, which is the ability to do emergency stops down to a total stop. And then in addition to that, you may have heard that some cars have a lane departure warning sound, which is if you're above a certain speed and you're not signaling to change lanes, if the vehicle sees that you're crossing lane lines, it will sound an audible alarm. but it won't actually move the vehicle. The Super Cruise technology will, in addition, it will correct the steering of the vehicle to keep you in the lane. So not really an autonomous vehicle, Lewis, but certainly a move in that direction that's going to be available next year to whoever wants the car.
Yeah, if you want to drop X number of dollars on this Cadillac, I like the technology, but you know, I guess we're kind of having those cars that are like these interim bridging the gap type vehicles between, you know, just our usual cars and fully autonomous vehicles. It's cool. And yeah, I guess this is a necessary step.
All right. Atlanta radio host Mike Bell was reportedly suspended yesterday over a tweet where he called the first female baseball analyst on ESPN, whose name is Jessica Mendoza, called her Tits McGhee. Tits McGhee, Lewis. How did he think this was a good idea? The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Bell made a reference to, from the movie Anchorman when he used the name to describe Jessica Mendoza. He deleted the tweet, but it was captured by people who know how to use the print screen button on their keyboard, saying, yes, tell us, Tits McGhee, when you're up there hitting the softball, you see a lot of 95-mile-an-hour cutters. And then, Lewis, the apology. You gotta love the clearly forced apology. He said, I didn't get it. I get it now. There is no place for that kind of stuff on my show. I will be more mindful. I hope I can make a better talk show host and better person. This has been an eye-opening experience. Any opportunity to become a better person after referring to a female anchor woman at Tits McGhee is an opportunity to be taken advantage of, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Very poor judgment. I think he's probably seen examples of this type of thing happening time and time again. And Dave, they still make these mistakes. Are we going to make one of these mistakes one of these days, or what's going to happen?
I don't know, but you know, when I do one of the mea culpas, the incredibly forced apologies, I'm going to feel really stupid because we've been criticizing those types of apologies for so long. My problem with Jessica Mendoza is not really a problem with Jessica Mendoza. When I think about sports journalism and sideline reporters, I could not care less whether the sideline reporter is a man or woman. I just don't get what the point of the sideline reporters is. And it applies to mostly football and basketball. Coach, you're losing right now. What went wrong? How can you fix it? Well, Jessica, we're losing because we didn't score as many points as the other team. And what we need to do is to start scoring more points. I've never seen any interesting insight come from those sideline reporters.
Very rarely. You know, sometimes it depends on who they're talking to. Occasionally, they will ask a question, which is a pretty simple question, and the coach or the player will really inject a lot of nuance into the answer. And at times like that, I can appreciate it. But yes, generally, you've got Bill Belichick type answers that say, we need to do better or something like that. And it's, you know, it's just kind of annoying.
All right. So unclear how long the suspension will be. Quite frankly, I'm not that concerned with how long the suspension is going to be. Just seriously a bad lack of common sense here in what this guy did. Lewis, I don't think you're going to get caught with any tweets like that. Now that you're on Twitter, it is a risk.
It's a risk. There's no one monitoring. I have no editor. I don't have a team monitoring my tweets before they go out. So, you know, I'm at risk, at least a little bit.
If you want to send us any kind of message, you can do so via voicemail. You can call 219-2-DAVID-P. That's 219-232-8437. Here's one voicemail we received about a documentary I have not recommended yet. Take a listen.
Hi, David. My name is Jake. I just watched the documentary Cowspiracy, and it was a pretty surprising documentary. It was the first that I was ever hearing about the effects that agriculture had on global warming. I haven't seen any videos from you or any other progressive YouTube channel. I haven't heard anything about it, obviously, in the mainstream media. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on it, and hopefully.
Yeah, so I'm about halfway through watching the documentary Cowspiracy, and Lewis, I would recommend that you also check it out. I have not yet made a determination as to whether I will recommend it or not. I like to see the entire film before deciding whether to recommend it, but I'm about halfway through Cowspiracy, and if it warrants a discussion on the program, we absolutely will have it. On today's bonus show, we will talk about Lewis in Boston. He made it. We will follow up on new format ideas from the audience. We will also discuss an American football team bringing their own toilet paper to London. What was unsatisfactory about British toilet paper to the the New York Jets? Wow, that was almost a horrible mistake. The New York Jets, not the New England Jets. All of that and more on the bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership. Sign up, get instant access.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.